La 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 la.
We got a newer, well, an older member they had to come in going. He could, I think I can talk to him. Don't ask you. My nephew, he plays with girls. Sounds pretty good. You can get him. I got the girl.
That's it. My problem is I can't march them.
That's 185. 185. Something like that.
Your ancestors.
Make sure I don't touch my neck. I'm fine. Did you tell her that it's not going to come through the actual speakers? It's for the audio. So she doesn't think it's not working. When everyone gets in here, we'll need to clip just in case. Yeah, Lord. It's just too much. No, this is my nose. We'll need to do that. Yeah, she's counting them as they come in, but just in case.
That one's easy.
So for now, I don't know why the speakers are working.
Okay.
That is not my expertise.
Okay. I can project, but I don't know if that affects the online people.
I'll have the stream up.
Okay.
On my phone. So
Okay.
I'll listen to it.
Okay.
I think the game
Do you want to double check this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah.
Now I don't know why.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. We're done.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. She's gonna project today. I'll try to project as well because the microphone to the speaker doesn't feel like working, but we're nice and intimate and can just talk in a regular casual conversation, right? It's not too bad in here. My name is Christy. I have met some of you, but if you haven't met me before, I'm Director of Education and Engagement here at Campus Martius. I do want to go over a couple of things before we get into our Cemeteries 101 talk. This is the last Discovering History Speaker series of 2025. So we have made it to December. Our next one will not be on the first Friday just because it's the 2nd of January. So since it's just the beginning of the year, we're going to skip that first week, but we do have a speaker in January. So I would suggest, especially because we have a few more in February than just one, to just check our website as often as you can, and we will keep that updated to what our calendar truly is. Our holiday schedule, if you need to come in with family and get them out of your house, if they're in your for the holidays and you need a reprieve, most of our days will be the same, 9:30 to 5, Monday through Saturday, and then noon on Sundays. We are closed Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Day. So we will be here New Year's Eve for the regular hours. That's always subject to, we have 2.5 staff, so sometimes someone needs to leave, but you can always call and just make sure nothing crazy's happened. I don't know how the snow weather will be. We never get snow on Christmas, so we'll probably be here. What else do we have? We may close for a couple of days to do a nice little museum refresh in the beginning of January. Again, check our website or check our Google. We try to also update our hours on that and our social medias. So we will say if anything closes, just trying to clean this place up, change out some signage, give us a day, because we want to be happy when we're facing you, and sometimes we are not when we are trying to shred documents. So it's better to just put us behind closed doors. You can still do holiday donations if you haven't made your donations to the museum yet. There is time, and there are a few different ways that you can do that as well. So you can either send a check to us through mail. You can drop one off at the front desk. You can also do one with your card or cash also at the desk. And you can do it online through our website, through the donate page. It's up at the top. You can click to get that. There are 3 different categories, so make sure that you're selecting the one that works best for you. So there's general donation that will go to the museum and everything we need to do reparations, exhibits, anything like that. There's also the Ohio River Museum. We are going to begin our exhibits planning stage. So the stage we're in now, all that money paid to build the building. And now we need to finish getting our donations for the exhibits and everything that will go into the main purpose of the museum. So you will see that under Ohio River Museum. And then the third is One Vote, which is the musical production that we will be executive producers on. So we will be helping for that. So you can specifically donate to that if you wish to, and that will hopefully be debuting in June or July of the summer. So let me see if I have anything else for you. I don't. That should be pretty good to end the year out. So let's get to our presenter today. So Krista Horrocks, she's Department Manager of the SHPO Administration. So the State Historic Preservation Office out of the Ohio History Connection, which is up in Columbus, doing all the magic of preservation. She's also OHC's cemetery preservationist, and she provides research support, guidance, and presentations like what she is doing today. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our speaker today, Krista Horrocks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. I used to do theater, so I can project. But if you have trouble hearing me, do something and I will speak even louder. But I'm going to try to, it's a small room, so hopefully I won't make y'all deaf. Just a couple things before we get started. This is being shown virtually as well, so for the sake of the online people, let's save questions until the very end. Okay, it'll make it a little easier. Also, all the information I'm going over with you today is on this reference list. There are some printed out here. There's probably not enough for everybody. please feel free to take my business card, and I will send you this electronically as well. There's a lot of live links to websites, so it's actually a little bit more helpful to have it electronically, but that is there. There's also another sheets here, and this is about grant funding options related to cemeteries. So this is a big question I get a lot. What grants are out there that can help us preserve and protect cemeteries? This is the list that I send people. I also have some what we call hot cards and swag over here related to the America 250 Ohio project for the Revolutionary War Veteran Graves Identification Project, which I will talk about at the very end of this presentation. But we have some fun stickers. We have very nice bumper stickers. So please feel free to stop up and get yourself. I have more too if we run out. So let's keep going. So as I was always introduced, my name is Krista. I'm Department Manager for SHPO Administration at the State Historic Preservation Office, which is a fun way of saying I mostly deal with the budget and I deal with our administration staff. I manage them and I manage our grant managers. But my background is archaeology and my specialty is historic cemeteries. So this is what I love to do, talking to you guys and helping people with cemeteries all throughout the state. And as I mentioned, I am the project manager for the Revolutionary War Veterans Grave Project. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, because being here in Washington County, you guys got a lot of veterans, right? So why is cemetery preservation important? Cemeteries give us tangible links to historical events and people. Every person buried in a cemetery has a story of their life and the impression they made on the world. And their gravestone is their final impression. And what I get so passionate about is, especially with really old gravestones here in Ohio, of course, everywhere, sometimes that's the only proof that some of these people ever even lived. You know, nowadays there's so much documentation on us from the day we were born till the day we die. But historically, sometimes young children didn't live long enough to make the census record, or there's just simply, very little documentation, especially about minority groups and women. So this is why gravestones are so important. It's proof to us that these people lived. A lot of people get into cemetery preservation through genealogy research. Sometimes it's the first time they set foot in a cemetery for any reasons besides going to a funeral. And then they see gravestones, or they go try to find their ancestors' gravestones, and they say, wow, that's a really bad condition. Or worse yet, I can't even find my ancestor's gravestone. And that's a lot of times where people get passionate about this. So I do want to give you a little bit of legalese. So just bear with me a little bit. What is a cemetery? So this probably seems kind of obvious, but it's not so much in revised code. So when I say the word cemetery, you're probably thinking the same thing I am, which is a Euro-American cemetery with gravestones, modern and historic. But Ohio Revised Code tells us that a cemetery is, and this is under two specific sections, a place of burial, including burial sites that contain American Indian burial objects placed with or containing American Indian human remains. So I just point that out because under Revised Code, cemeteries aren't just necessarily the burial places of our ancestors as Caucasian Americans, but also for American Indian burial sites. And then under this other Revised Code, which is the Establishment of Endowment Care, a cemetery is defined as a burial ground for earth interments, a mausoleum for crypt entombments, a columbarium for deposit of cremated remains, and interestingly, the scattering ground for the spreading of cremated remains. So burial practices, especially in the last, 20, 50 years, have changed a lot. We do a lot more cremation nowadays. A lot of people are choosing not even to be buried in a cemetery. They say, well, I want my scattered remains spread over, my home or my farmstead or in this place that meant a lot to me. So just interestingly, Ohio Revised Code do consider those places cemeteries. But that's not really what I'm here to get too much into about, because I do want to talk to you more about historic burial grounds, which for the most part people were buried, full body burial interments. So why do we know so much about cemeteries in Ohio? We really can thank the Ohio Geological Society for this. They did all the work to help us document cemeteries in the state. There's this book, sometimes we call it the Troutman book or the Big Blue book. There's probably a copy somewhere here in this museum called Ohio Cemeteries 1803 to 2003. A lot of your libraries have it. You can order copies online, so definitely check it out. It was published by the Ohio Genealogical Society around 2003, and it documents 14,637 cemeteries. That's a lot of cemeteries, right? There are actually more than that because there has been cemeteries identified since this was published that were not found and put in this book. But that gives us a rough estimate, and I usually tell people there's about 14,600 plus cemeteries in the state. So the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing, they're the ones that manage cemeteries in the state. So they really group cemeteries as active and registered. So if you have a cemetery, or not you, but if there's a cemetery in your community that is actively receiving burials or has received burials in the last 25 years, the cemetery is legally required to be registered with the Department of Commerce Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing. There's about 4,200, those stats are a little old now, but about 4,200 active cemeteries in the state. There's a lot of laws and regulations around active cemeteries, which again is not my specialty and not what I'm here to talk about, because really what I'm interested in and expertise in are these inactive cemeteries. So most of these are cemeteries that are so old they were never part of this registration process, because of course this was Department of Commerce Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing was not around when the state became a state in 1803. So it was number of years later before cemeteries became registered. So inactive cemeteries, again, could be a cemetery that was registered but hasn't had an active burial in the last 25 years, or a family cemetery. And a family cemetery is defined by revised code as a cemetery containing the human remains of persons, at least 3/4 of whom have a common ancestor or are the spouse or adopted child of that common ancestor. So we are seeing more modern day cemeteries qualify as family cemeteries because people are choosing to, for example, be buried on their own property with just maybe them and their spouse and their children. So those are not registered registered cemeteries. And then, of course, a lot of those historic cemeteries, ones that are on private property, still on private property, some of them are lost to time. A lot of those are considered these family cemeteries. And just simply doing the math, we know there's 14,600 plus cemeteries in the state. We know there's 4,200 active. We simply do the math and it tells us that around 10,400 are these inactive, unregistered cemeteries. So a lot more are inactive and unregistered. If you do have a concern about an active registered cemetery, there is a process set up through the Ohio Cemetery Dispute Resolution Commission. Again, this isn't my expertise. I'm just letting you know that if you feel like an active cemetery is maybe not following the laws or not doing what they have to do, there is this complaint form that you can file online. And the Ohio Cemetery Dispute Resolution Commission acts as the mediator between you and the cemetery to help resolve the issues. This does not work with inactive, unregistered cemeteries because this group does not have jurisdiction over those, okay? So again, I'm trying to get through this legalese before I bore y'all. This is just some revised code. Again, that's all on the sheet over there. I'm not going to go through it, but cemeteries in the state really are classified based on, does the township own them? Does the municipality own them? Are they owned by a private cemetery association? So there's different language in revised code. So you really have to know who owns a cemetery. So a lot of times when people call me up with questions about cemeteries, the first thing I say is, who owns it? And a lot of times the answer is, well, I don't know. And that's fair. That's fine. So the auditor's website is a great place to start if you're not sure who owns a cemetery. It's not always correct, but it's a good place to start. I also have some revised code there, again, on the spreadsheet that does talk about some of our protection laws that we have in Ohio, especially around vandalism and desecration, care of a cemetery that is under township jurisdiction. So that will tell you if a township owns a cemetery, what they're required to do. Then also the conveyance of land abandoned for cemetery purposes, which is under municipal jurisdiction. So this is essentially if a municipality owns a cemetery and they say, we're going to sell it to McDonald's, to build a McDonald's over because nobody cares about that cemetery anymore. There is law around the fact that they can't just do that. They have to disinter the bodies. They have to move the gravestones. So there is some language around that. Just some recent legislation. African American Burial Grounds Preservation Program. This was legislation that kind of floated around for a number of years right before COVID. It did pass eventually December 23rd of 2022. It was sponsored by Ohio Senator Brown, Sherrod Brown, and Representative Alma Adams out of North Carolina. So the point of this program is to create a National Park Service program to identify, preserve, restore, interpret, and research and document historic African American burial grounds. So ever since this bill has sort of been floating around, I've been trying to do research. Our office has been doing research on African American cemeteries in Ohio. I personally have been able to identify about 100, but that number is probably likely higher because one of the things I have not done is work specifically with descendant communities yet to see what cemeteries they identify as being African American. This program is only going to fund $3 million a year for 5 consecutive years. For a federal grant program, that's not very much, especially when every state in the union is going to want a little piece of that puzzle. Unfortunately, this program, even though it was passed in 2022 as part of the omnibus bill, has never been funded. So it is not in process yet. It is not something people can pursue. But it is technically approved and written into whatever law. It's just never been financially funded to start the program. So if that's anything that interests you, just keep an eye on it. Okay, I'm done with the legal talk. All right, so researching the cemetery. This is your most important step. A lot of times when people talk to me, again, they go to cemeteries, they see that they're being neglected, not well taken care of, and they say, I just want to get in there and I want to clean up the stones and I want to clean up the brush, and I tell them, you really need to do your research first. The research really is the most important part. And that's because the research will outlive all of us, and most importantly, it'll outlive the gravestones. There is nothing we can currently do to forever preserve a gravestone. So our historic gravestones in the state are mostly sandstone and marble. They degrade under the weather. There's nothing you can do to stop that. Some things will slow it down, but it will never stop that. And that's why documenting and writing, creating inventories, putting what's on gravestones, taking good pictures, that's really the most important thing you can do. So you care about cemeteries, but maybe you don't know a lot about them. So what cemeteries are in your area? So I recommend starting on a website like Find a Grave. I'm sure a lot of you have used Find a Grave before. It is a crowdsourced database, which I mostly point that out because there is incorrect information on Find a Grave. But there is ways to ask for corrections and things through the system. So it just sort of is what it is, but it's a great place to start. You can search in your township or in your county and just kind of see cemeteries in your area. You can look up, if you said maybe I'm not originally from Ohio and I want to see what my ancestors' gravestones maybe look like. You can look them up and maybe somebody in that area has taken pictures. So it's a really great place to start. Another option is working with the Ohio Genealogical Society's Cemetery Location Free Index. So that big blue Troutman book that I told you about, this is also online in a less informative form if you're not an OGS member. If you are an OGS member, to my understanding, you can see pretty much the whole book online, but they do have a free index. Again, you can search by county or by township or simply by cemetery name if you just want to find some very high-level information about cemeteries in your area. Many cemeteries in Ohio are located on private property. Those are the ones I was telling you about, those small family cemeteries that we say sometimes they're in a farmer's back 40, right? So I do recommend you request permission from an owner before attempting to access those cemeteries. There is nothing written in our revised code that gives you, as either a researcher or a descendant, permission to access somebody's private property to go to your family's cemetery. Unfortunately, there's nothing that says you can, there's nothing that says you can't. Some states do have language around that, but we don't in Ohio. So please make sure to Get in touch with the property owner. Again, if you don't know who owns the property, the auditor's website is a great place to start. Write a letter, pick up the phone, knock on the door, play nice. And chances are you'll be able to access the cemetery. For the most part, township, municipal, and private association cemeteries are publicly accessible. Just make sure to check with open hours. Most cemeteries are open from dawn to dusk. That's pretty typical. But they might have other regulations, so just check that out before you visit. So I'm kind of going to talk about local records and then more like state and federal level records that you can use to help research your cemetery. So some local records could be the Cemetery Association itself. So they might have a lot of records. A lot of times these aren't yet digitized, or the historic ones might not be digitized, but maybe the more modern burials are. So give them a call, stop in. A lot of times you'll be going through like note cards and things that are historic records of burials in the cemetery. A church. So even if a cemetery is no longer managed by a church, but it was historically, the church itself, the congregation, even if they moved, might still have records of that cemetery. Township trustees. Again, if the township owns cemeteries, call up a trustee, ask them what records they have. Again, a lot of times they might have documentation, but it's not necessarily digitized, so it's not something you can just Google and easily find online. City and village records, same thing. If it's a municipal-owned cemetery, check with your local historical society. Some historical societies have a lot of information about cemeteries in their area. If you happen to be more from Columbus, we do have at the Ohio History Center a research room that has a lot of those county-level cemetery inventories in them. So for me, I'm originally from Knox County, but I can walk up from the first floor to the third floor and do research on cemeteries in my area more easily than going to my hometown. Many of these county-level cemetery inventories were created during the bicentennial in the 1970s. So as I will talk about at the very end, we're almost at the 250th anniversary. So hopefully we might see maybe a resurgence of interest in documenting cemeteries due to this 250th anniversary. But for the most part, these records are very helpful, mostly because they're historic records in and of themselves. They're 50 years old, almost 50 years old. And they could document gravestones that aren't there anymore, or maybe aren't legible anymore. So these are definitely worthwhile resources. Keep in mind, sometimes local records just don't exist. A lot of times I hear, well, this cemetery had a burial record, but it burned up in a fire. There must have been a lot of fires historically. But for the most part, a lot of very small cemeteries, especially family-owned ones, never had burial records. It was understood that people would be able to remember who was buried where. So it's not uncommon. If you're going, I really can't find anything historically about this cemetery, don't be too surprised, because it just might have never existed. If you want to make some cemetery connections, meet other people that have an interest in what you have, or that might have records. Again, the Ohio Genealogical Society, they have chapters in almost every county. So check them out. It can be a great resource for you. There is a group called the Association for Gravestone Studies. This is mostly an American-centric, but it is worldwide organization. I serve on the board for it. We're a fun group that loves to hang out in cemeteries. So if that's what you love, join the Association for Gravestone Studies. Exploring Almost Forgotten Grave Sites in the Great State of Ohio blog, and the complimentary Facebook page, Preserving Ohio's Cemeteries. I highly recommend this resource. So award-winning Linda Jean Limes-Ellis, who won both of these awards, both on the Association for Gravestone Studies and through Scenic Ohio recently. She runs this blog and this Facebook. She's out of Lorain County, and she really has her thumb on the pulse of Ohio cemeteries. So this is a great resource. She keeps you updated on goings-on in cemeteries across the state, maybe if there's any like preservation workshops coming on. It's a really great resource, so I highly recommend it. And then you can make contacts through Find a Grave or Ancestry.com. Again, other people that might be able to help you with your research. So state and federal level cemetery records. This is a little bit more of my specialty because I've done a deep dive into this. If you guys have heard of the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, most of you have, a lot of people say, oh, they built dams, they built roads. Yes, they did, but they also did a lot of historic research. So the WPA in Ohio ran this project called the Veterans Grave Registration. This card is probably a card that looks familiar to some of you, because if you've ever researched an ancestor that's a veteran pre-World War II, you might have come across that card on like Fold 3 or Ancestry. This was the final product that the WPA put together for this project, but it's actually a 3-part series of documents that can really help you if you want to combine them all to help with your cemetery research. So this is Harmon E. Zippernick, who I think has the best name ever. He was the state chairman of this project for the WPA. He's buried in Columbiana County. And he explains the project in a copy of a report we have as to prepare a complete record of the veterans of all 31 wars, insurrections, and uprising in which the United States has been engaged, including Confederate States of America and regularly enlisted men of all branches of service. So again, as the name tells you, the goal of this project was to document veterans' graves. So if you're looking for the grave of a veteran, this is a great place to start. But what if you're not looking for the grave of a veteran? It can still really help you with your research, and I'll tell you why. So I want to give you a quick overview of what this registration card is and what it's telling you. It mostly gives you some very high-level information about the person, like their name, their birth and death date, where they're buried, the location of their burial cemetery, and then it talks about usually rows and graves numbers, and then this is the service record. In this case, Daniel Campbell is recorded as service suspected, only like name and roster. Again, this research was being done by historians and librarians in the late 1930s, early 1940s. They did not have Ancestry. They did not have access to all the great resources we have now. So they were doing their best. Not every veteran recorded on here is actually a veteran, and a lot of veterans were missed as part of the project, but it's still a great place to start. Oh, not too far. And then the other really significant piece of this project that a lot of people don't know about are these plot maps. So a lot of these plot maps exist in county recorder's office, and they're huge. I mean, most of them are massive. So these plot maps were done by surveyors that worked for the WPA. And what we've learned from reporting is that a lot of these, the goal was to go map these cemeteries. And how they originally started was they said, well, we're going to get in touch with these, sextons and cemetery managers and have them give us their map and we'll remake them. And then they realized there was no maps. So they actually had to go out and survey the cemeteries themselves. So 41 counties do have these maps available. All of these are very easily researched through Linda Ellis's blog that I mentioned earlier. Linda has done so much work all over the state trying to identify the location of all of these maps because they're so significant and they can be so important for cemetery researchers. And she's also kept the fight going to try to convince a lot of these county recorders' office to digitize them. So that number really has increased, especially a lot in the last 5 and 10 years. So that's what they look like. So I do want to tell you there are a couple counties where the cemetery plot maps are missing. So again, Linda has done a lot of work trying to track them down. These are the counties that seem to be missing. She has contacted recorder's office, historical societies, anybody she can think of, and they say, we've never seen anything like that. So it's possible these are stuck in a back government shelf and nobody knows what they are. It's possible they were destroyed. It's possible they're sitting in somebody's attic somewhere, right? So if you do have an interest in any of those red counties, I apologize. But if you also happen to be researching in any of these red counties and find anything that looks like that, please let me know, let Linda know, because we want to be able to tell people where these are located. There is also 2 counties, Adams and Huron, where the maps, they're just the drawings of the cemeteries and they don't have the veteran information on it. So it kind of seems like they're almost like a draft version or they were never finished. They are still helpful. They're just not the final version. So just heads up there. And then we have this, which is really the least known of this series, which we call the civilian grave registration cards. So these cards are actually in the Ohio History Center in the third floor archive under State Archive Series 1166. This is a 50-box series of these cards. So the best we can understand is when the WPA started this project, they told these WPA workers, go to the cemetery for the veterans. Okay. And about 3 months into the project, they realized they were not hitting the veteran count that they thought they would. They were way, way low. And what they realized was a lot of veterans don't have anything on their gravestone that indicates they're a veteran. So they said they kind of had to start over. And instead what they did was they gave these cards, this is what most of them look like, to these WPA workers. And they said, go out into the cemetery and record any male that would have lived long enough to be potentially military aged. So they, for the most part, did not record women and they did not record children. Let's see where we're at from here. Okay, so these cards, again, look similar to the other ones, but they're handwritten. And then you see these wars served in code. Ooh, I touched the screen. And there's just a whole series of numbers. And when I first ran into these and talking to Linda about them, I'm like, what are all these numbers? And what I realized, what these WPA workers were doing was they were probably looking at nothing more than the birth and death date of these men and saying, what series of wars could they have served in based on their birth and death date? And all of these numbers mean nothing unless you have this. So this document tells you those 31 wars, insurrections. That's what Harmon Zippernick was telling us about. Now, the plot maps themselves mostly only refer to the 6 main wars, which is the one, for the most part, you guys would recognize. Revolutionary War is number 1. War of 1812 is number 10. Mexican-American War is 16. The Civil War is 19. The Spanish-American War is 25. And then it just says World War, which again is World War I to us because this predates World War II. And then a lot of other things in between that, like, I'm not a war historian, so I didn't even know what a lot of these were when I first saw this. So I had to look a lot of these up, kind of get dates on them and things. You really don't see a lot of veterans recognized under anything but those 6 main wars. Again, this is all on Linda Ellis's blog. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, this was a 50-box series. And this series is, it's considered an uncurated collection, which I'm not a curator, so I'm not really sure what that means, except if you go to research these and you show up and say, I want to see series 1166, the archivist is going to say, you want all 50 boxes? Because it's a lot of paperwork, and it's just, some of the boxes are literally of these forms thrown into a box. So one of the things I did about 7 years ago is I went through all 50 boxes and I just at least tried to identify the surname ranges and the counties in each box, because unfortunately it's not like here's your Franklin County or here's your Washington County files. They're all mixed in everywhere. So this is what I learned is it seems like the collection we have is very Central Ohio centric. And as you can see, unfortunately, this box has, or this collection has no documentation from Washington County. So if you are researching cemeteries here, I'm afraid it's not going to help you. I don't know why. I know that the WPA was broke up. Their work was broke up in districts. So it's possible maybe we only received a couple districts worth of these cards. There was only 3 state archives when the WPA ended. We do have documentation that these cards went to the state archives. It was us at what the Ohio History Connection was back then. It is Alden Library at Ohio University, and it's Western Reserve Historical Society. And unfortunately, neither of the places have any of these cards. So we're not really sure where the rest is. That's my life goal, is to try to find these, because they are very helpful. They document more men than what's in the veteran records, because of course, being called the civilian grave registration, it represents everybody that was recorded, not just the veterans. And again, you're not really going to find women or children, but the helpfulness of this is usually if you can find where the male patriarch is buried, chances are his family is buried around him, right? So, okay, I do a whole presentation on that. So if you ever want to learn more, let me know. So, all right, you've done all your research. Thank you very much. That's what I asked. Now you're ready to go into the cemetery, do some inventorying, start doing some cleanup. So I just want to give you a really high-level information on what you'll see when you enter a cemetery. So, of course, this is a headstone, example of a headstone, also called a gravestone or a tombstone. Those are all terms used interchangeably. Footstone. A footstone was used to simply demarcate literally the foot of the burial. A lot of people see these and they think they're children's stones because they're small. But if all they have on them are initials, then they're footstones. And the initials are meant to match with the headstone. So these are the first gravestones to disappear in a cemetery because they're small. A lot of times maintenance people get sick of mowing around them and they chuck them off to the side. But that's, they're very common historically. We don't use them so much anymore. You might see these family plot markers, which sometimes just have a name, or they might actually duplicate the information on a gravestone. And then it's just some common gravestone materials. So granite is pretty much 100% what we make gravestones out of nowadays. Granite is very, very hard. Granite gravestones will last hundreds of years, if not longer. But granite, because it's so hard, is very, very difficult to hand carve. So because of that, it was not really used historically. There was some hand carving done before the Industrial Revolution, but for the most part, what we see now with granite markers started around in this era, the 1920s and 1930s, because that's when we started having more of the mechanics to be able to carve granite gravestones. So historically, you see a lot more marble. This is marble right here. Limestone, which looks a lot like marble. A lot of times it's hard to tell them apart. Usually I tell people if you go up to a gravestone and it's 200 plus years old and you say, wow, that marble marker's in really good shape, probably limestone. Because limestone will hold up better than marble will. Sandstone is also very common, especially for our very, very old gravestones here in Ohio. Down here, this is a type of brownstone, which is a type of sandstone. A lot of our sandstone markers hold up very well for the most part. We see pretty good condition and preservation on sandstone, but they do sometimes, like the whole face will sort of sometimes remove from them, so they can degrade. And then white bronze is another type of historic stone. Well, not stone, actually. So these are, if you ever go into a cemetery and it's a big metal marker, that's what these are. They're called white bronze, but they're actually almost pure zinc, so they're not bronze at all. Most of them were made by the Monumental Bronze Company in Bridgeport, Connecticut from 1874 to 1914. There were some other companies making them as well. These were literally sold door to door and from a catalog, like a Sears type of catalog. They seem to be pretty popular in certain areas and then other areas not. So chances are, like any sort of keeping up with the Joneses idea, somebody decides to get one and then their neighbor wants one and then that neighbor wants one. They really were considered a more economic way to have a larger, fancier gravestone than having it carved out of stone. They're very slow to corrode. They have almost a bluish tint to them. And like I said, from a distance, they look like marble. But when you get up to them and if you got them, metal and they're hollow. They're very stable markers. Some really large ones can sag from the weight over time, but honestly, most of all of them I've ever seen look just as good as the day they were installed. Please do not ever try to repair one of these gravestones yourself. Zinc is very toxic if you heat it up. So you would definitely need to bring in a specialist. But like I said, most of these gravestones have held up really well over time. Other gravestone materials you might come across, slate. Slate is what you see in Massachusetts and New York and Connecticut. Out east, there's 1700 stones. Most of those are slate. Slate just simply was out of fashion by the time Ohio was settled. So we don't really see hardly any of it here, unless it's usually a more modern use of it. Sometimes you'll see metal stones, concrete, and then what I call folk art material. So we don't see a whole lot of folk art here in Ohio. You see it a lot more down south, especially in African-American cemeteries. All of these pictures were actually taken at the cemetery on Kelly's Island. So there's some really cool folk art up there if you ever want to check it out. But it's still, some of it's, this is a 2010 gravestone. Some of it's still very modern. It's just choice of the family. But it's fun. There's whole people that study folk art gravestones. So other cemetery elements. We call this the fabric of the historic landscape. So I just point this out because it's very easy when you're doing a cemetery inventory to walk into a cemetery and just focus on the gravestones. Like sort of forget about everything else around it. But everything is important. It is the fabric of what makes up the cemetery in and of itself. Some elements you might run across are what's called cribbing or coping. This is an example here. This is not very common. This picture is actually from Atlanta. So we don't see it too much here, but you might see it in more like the rural cemetery movement cemeteries. So the big ones, Spring Grove, Lakewood, Green Lawn Cemetery, big one. Fencing, furniture, sculpture. Don't forget all of that can be historic and can be original to the cemetery. So just make sure to make note of it and inventory it. This I like to show people because a lot of people don't realize it, and it can affect your cemetery if you're doing a preservation project. So historically, we actually buried people different than what we do now. And this is due to the Victorian taboo that they did not believe on walking on top of a grave. They thought it was bad luck and disrespectful. So historically, again, I point out this is under the Christian tradition because it might differ if you're in a cemetery of a different religion. The headstone inscription is facing west. That footstone that we don't see so much anymore, the inscription is facing east. Of course, the head of the person is there, the foot of the people are there. And to read the gravestone, you're actually standing on that side. So you always know where the body is. We sort of lost that taboo in our culture, right? So now a lot of times in cemeteries, we've actually flipped the orientation of the headstone. We got rid of the footstones completely, and to actually read the gravestone, a lot of times we're standing on top of the grave to do that. But that being said, a lot of cemeteries now are laid out more aesthetically and not necessarily to this religious idea of the bodies facing east-west type of thing. So this could be different. It might not be the case in every cemetery, but I just want to point this out because I have gone to cemeteries where they've all been restored and the cemetery looks great, but every single headstone is facing east. Because they said, well, that's the way we bury people. But that wasn't the way historically. A lot of times we buried people. Again, there's exceptions to the rule. So the best thing is if you're working on a cemetery that you're resetting gravestones, look at the ones that absolutely you can confirm have unlikely to have been moved. Or look at the bases. So a lot of gravestones sit in bases. A lot of times those bases haven't moved. So you can kind of tell maybe which way the headstones originally faced. So just the anatomy of a gravestone. You're looking at a gravestone. What does all this information mean? The symbol, a lot of times you'll have a symbol up top. I do a whole nother presentation on gravestone symbology. So I won't go too much into it now, but the Victorians loved their symbolism. They have, a meaning for everything. Every flower means something. Type of bird means something to them. There's a lot of course, religious symbolism. Fraternal organizations were very popular in the 1800s in Ohio. So you see a lot of those. Maybe military, especially Civil War veterans that were killed in action. Possibly the profession of the person was seen. And then very rarely, but occasionally you might see cause of death. So I like to show off this one. This is not in Ohio. It's in South Carolina. But this is a gentleman. He was a slave. And he actually died in his bed, sleeping at night, by a lightning strike. And his master made this gravestone to memorialize him. Very rare to see this, especially here in Ohio. But it's kind of interesting. It's informative, right? So definitely worth looking at. I point this out because I think this is just very high level symbolism understanding. It's a really great book written by Dr. James Dietz that if you were an archaeology or anthropology student, you probably read it, but it's a great read even if you're not a professional. In Small Things Forgotten, The Archaeology of Early American Life. And Dr. Dietz has a whole section on the research he did around gravestone symbolism in Massachusetts. And this really, I would argue, kind of started this interest in gravestone symbolism in America, not Ohio, but in America. And what he observed was this evolution of gravestone symbolism, with the first one being the death head, or the skull and crossbones design. Again, very rare in Ohio. You'll see that out East Coast, in Massachusetts especially, those very kind of morbid death symbols, right? That evolved cherub design. A lot of times you'll still see the wing. Instead of a skull face, you'll see sort of a happy little cherub. And then from there, it just kind of made a full 180 and did the urn and willow design. And here in Ohio, so I kind of, again, he's working in a cemetery in Massachusetts, which starts all the way down the 1720s, which we don't have gravestones that old here. So I just put in some very early Ohio dates. So in 1772, we have the Moravian settlement of Schönbrunn, which is up in Tuscarawas, really one of the first settlements that involved Europeans here in Ohio. And then right here, Marietta, one of the earliest established cities in Ohio. 1788, Ohio becomes a state in 1803. And then I put the War of 1812 on here because this is when a lot of people say, like, what are some of the oldest gravestones you see? I tell people usually some of the oldest gravestones in Ohio you'll see that are still legible would be the War of 1812. Yes, we have older ones, especially down here, for example. But in most areas of Ohio, usually if you see a gravestone from 1811, 1812, and you can still read it, that's a pretty good sign. So, based on his chart, I mean, we're really like pretty far into the urn and willow design, right? So if you go into a cemetery in Ohio, you're going to see tons and tons of urns and willow. It's very rare to see. You'll never, really hardly ever see a death head. Very rare to see cherubs. This is one example that I do have. Unfortunately, as you can see, the face has eroded off. This is in Licking County. Dates to 1835, which is a little bit later, but it was definitely design. So just fun to find that kind of stuff. So if you're really into symbolism, you know, again, it's a whole avenue. And then you have the inscription of the stone itself. So usually that involves historically the name, the date of death, the age at death, the epitaph, and then this is something that's often overlooked. This is the carver name or location. So this is not on every gravestone by any means. But when you are in a cemetery and you're looking at gravestones, take a look at the very bottom of the stone and see if you can find any of these carver marks. So these are just some examples. In some stones that are just set directly into the ground, because of the weight of the stone, they'll sink over time. So even if there is a carver, it might be underground and you can't read it. But these were literally like advertisements. So people would put their information on the stone. So if you, I really like that stone, I'm going to go have that guy carve, my wife's gravestone. What else is there to say? There is some people that research carvers, follow their work, document their work. So it's not a field that's very well documented here in Ohio. There's a lot of that going on the East Coast. So if that's something that interests you, it's definitely some pretty cool stuff out there. So documenting gravestones, really the best thing to do to document a gravestone is to take photographs. We have such great cameras on our phones nowadays that you can really take really, really high quality photos. But what about gravestone rubbing? I do still get people that ask me about this. Cemetery preservationists do not recommend gravestone rubbing. There really is no reason to do it anymore due to our very high quality digital photography. And a lot of cemeteries are really not allowing it. So if you insist on doing it, you really need to talk to the owners of the cemetery because they might not even allow it. It can degrade the stones, but more than anything else, we don't recommend it because a lot of times this is done as a children's activity. So I actually grew up, when I was in 3rd grade, they hauled us all out to the local historic cemetery, gave us some paper and crayons and said, do a rubbing, that'd be fun. But the problem is, especially in old historic, sometimes neglected cemeteries, the gravestones are leaning. Children, they play, they roughhouse. Even adults, if you're down on the ground trying to do a rubbing, you have a hard time getting back up, you might want to grab the stone to brace yourself. And if the stone might not be stable, and really the best case scenario is that it falls, or maybe the gravestone falls on breaks, but you don't want it to fall on you, right? Or a child. So even very small gravestones can weigh hundreds of pounds. So this is really why we do not recommend doing gravestone rubbing. It just can be dangerous to you and yourself and others involved. I do see the use of shaving cream, flour, and chalk sometimes on gravestones. So people use these to rub on the gravestone to read them better. Again, sometimes that's why rubbing is done too, to attempt to read them better. But all of these materials can damage the stone, especially flour and shaving cream. It creates this kind of biological microenvironment that was never meant to exist on the stone, which can degrade it. It can cause growth that's not natural. Chalking, a lot of times chalking is done with just cheap children's sidewalk chalk, and that actually contains plaster of Paris. So people say, oh, I just chalk the stone and when it rains, it'll just wash off. No, that plaster of Paris actually turns into plaster on the stone, and then it's very hard to get it off. So we really recommend the use of these materials on any gravestone just because of the damage it can cause. This is an example out of Morrow County by Tim Four, who's a cemetery preservationist in the area. This picture was on Find a Grave. So this is somebody that used shaving cream because they were having a hard time reading the stone. They literally sprayed it on and used a squeegee to get it into the crevices. Yes, it made it legible. But when Tim visited we don't know when this picture was taken exactly, but when Tim visited the gravestone so many years later, this was the condition of it. And this stone had survived. This is from 1825. I cannot say definitively that shaving cream caused this, but it certainly doesn't look good, right? So this is just an example of why we don't want people to use this on gravestones. So if you say, well, I'm having a hard time reading them, what else can I do? There is other methods. So let me show you them. So what we just simply call the natural sunlight method. And this is going to the cemetery at a time when the light and the shadows are working in your favor. So if you're visiting a cemetery over and over again, maybe it's in your hometown and you want to do documentation, just go to the cemetery at different times of the day and see when the light works best for you. Again, if your cemetery is all under, trees, this might not work for you. But this is an example of a photograph taken at 1:40 p.m. on a west-facing gravestone in full sunlight. And it gave ideal lighting conditions to read this 184-year-old recently cleaned gravestone. So this is a cemetery in my hometown I visit often. And I just realized when I go sort of in the earlier afternoon, I get really good sunlight for all these west-facing stones. But if you're going to a cemetery maybe once, and you're like, this is it, this is the only chance I got, you might want to take a mirror with you. So this is just the mirror effect, and it's using a mirror to help guide the sunlight where you want it. So it is helpful if you have more than one person doing it, but you can rig this up for yourself. But simply have somebody take some sort of large reflective surface. This is some of us at the Association for Gravestones this year in New York, Pennsylvania. John right here is simply holding a full-length closet mirror, something cheap you get somewhere for 10, 15 bucks. And he's angling the sunlight to reflect directly on those stones so that Judy and Joe can get really good photographs. So this is a really great method, especially if you want to go and you want to document these gravestones once and for all, take good photos and be done. Just to show you an up close, this is really, again, it's creating those shadows and those highlights, and all you got to do is move the mirror around till you say, yes, that's perfect, let me get a photo. This is just another example. This gravestone has writing all the way down, but the mirror is really giving you that shadow, and you can't read it at all down there. So just really good method to use. Very cheap, practical. Anything reflective you can use this for. You can also use the negative or invert tool. A lot of your phones will have like free apps that'll do this. So for those of us that still remember, film photography and you look at the negatives, that's what this is doing. This is good if you have digital photographs that you've taken in the past, but you're like, I really can't read them. Sometimes using this negative or this invert tool will just help you bring out the wording. It's not good for, archival purposes, but it's good to help you read it. Okay. So just another easy thing to try. And then I just want to point this out, 3D modeling. This is the future of cemetery preservation. This was done by Joseph Snyder, who's an archaeologist and cemeteryist with Terracon. And he did what I'm about to show you. He did all this with his iPhone. Oh no! I didn't think about that. I don't know if I can make him play. Can I click that? Oh, there we go. Fancy. So just incredible quality photography. This is, photogrammetry, if you've ever heard this word before. What Joe is doing, let's see if I have 3 or 4 of them. Let's see if I can figure out how to go back. Oh yeah. All right, here we go. This is fancy. All right, here's another one he did. Just the quality is absolutely incredible. So what he's doing is he's using an app, and really what he's doing is he's just circling the stone, and using this app, and this app is taking hundreds of pictures, and then it combines them all into this 3D model. And then he does his thing and post-processes it, and really just, he just shared this with me as a video file. So I would love to see this be something that maybe someday can be shown on like Find a Grave, if we ever have the ability to show like videos. So this is one with a headstone and a footstone. So he did both. It's really cool. You can actually see the carver lines. So the carver actually made lines in the stone to keep the spacing. So just really high quality stuff. This is really cool. Really fancy quality photogrammetry work can not only do this quality of work, but also in documentation, it can also give you exact measurements of the stone, which is pretty cool, for especially if the stone ever needed to be recreated, 3D printed, I don't know. So it's really cool. A lot of the technology out there that's just kind of starting to make its way into the cemetery preservation world. Just some other things to keep in mind. Gravestones can post-date a burial by many years. So this is just an example where it flat out tells me this guy died in 1823, but this gravestone was not erected until 1915. Sometimes usually it doesn't actually tell you that. This is an example, same cemetery. It's definitely a modern gravestone, but made to look historic, right? So just keep in mind that even historic gravestones, a lot of times were not placed when the person died. It wasn't uncommon for gravestones to be erected maybe by their children or their grandchildren later in life, sometimes decades after the person died. So if you are doing genealogical research and you're like, the information on the gravestone is definitely not the historic information I'm finding, it's possible they got it wrong, right? So just keep that in mind. Also, sometimes mistakes were made. So when carvers were hand carving stones, a lot of times they messed up, right? And I've seen some pretty egregious examples of this. And I always think like, wow, like I wonder if the family went to the grave site and were like, seriously, that's what I paid for. But it was so much work to hand carve a gravestone that they wouldn't have started over. So they just did their best. So it's interesting. It's kind of fun to find these mistakes on gravestones. But more than anything else, it's worth noting, right? So when you're interpreting, if you're writing down what the gravestone says, make a note that this word is written above. It was added later. It's part of the historic story. And then gravestone preservation and training, if this is really something you want to get into, we don't have any consistent gravestone preservation workshops here in Ohio. They've kind of come and gone. But one thing you might look into is Jason Church with the NCPTT. This is the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. They work as kind of a contract organization for the National Park Service. He has some really great resources online, videos, just to help you get informed and understand better preservation techniques. He has ones on cleaning and things like that. So Jason really is, you know, who I consider like the cemetery preservationist in this country. His organization has done a lot of the research into the way we do preservation and the correct methodology. And then if you are interested in actual in-person, getting your hands dirty workshops, really one of the best ones to go to is with us at the Association for Gravestone Studies. We have an all-day workshop that's part of our annual conference. Next year, it's going to be in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so it's not too far from Ohio. But you're really training with some of the best preservationists we have. So it is a good opportunity if you're willing to look into it. Check out Linda Ellis's Exploring Almost Forgotten Grave Sites blog, because if there is preservation workshops going on, she'll post them. And then just check with your local cemetery or historical society. And if there is no trainings, if you can't find anything in your area, then consider sponsoring one. You know, bringing in a preservationist to do some work and help with maybe your volunteer group get some training. So what more can you do? Make connections with others interested in your cemetery preservation project. Start a Friends of group. This is very commonly used, especially in maybe township cemeteries, where the township might say, we really don't have any more money than just to keep the place mowed. Creating a Friends of group, you can help raise money to do preservation work that the township maybe just might not be able to afford to do. Educate yourself on proper cemetery preservation, documentation and preservation techniques before diving headfirst into a project. Don't be afraid to ask for help, know your limits, and hire and seek out a professional if you absolutely need to. Again, gravestones are very big, very heavy, can be very dangerous. So you don't want to just go in there and start moving stuff around. You don't want to get anybody hurt. Educate yourself on Ohio cemetery law and the revised code. So that was all that boring stuff I talked about at the beginning. Read through it, learn more about your cemetery and how the revised code plays into the cemetery based on ownership, and know the chains of command. Like I said, when people call me about a cemetery, these are really the first questions I ask. Is your cemetery active or inactive? Who owns the cemetery, and then what laws to apply here? So it's just a great way to get yourself started. I talk about the Revolutionary War Veterans Grave Project. So this is one of our initiatives with America 250. There's an estimated 7,000 Revolutionary War veterans buried here in Ohio. And what we're doing is we're working with groups. We're starting with a lot of information from the Sons of the American Revolution, because they really got us started, to document the actual burial sites of every Revolutionary War veteran buried here in Ohio. So we have created an app. We're working with Terracon. So Joe, that I showed those cool 3 models of, he's actually our project manager of this. There's a free app you download on your phone through a program called Survey 123. And you can go out and find Revolutionary War veterans. It prompts you to take photographs and to take GPS coordinates and just to answer some very simple information for us. So this, like I said, I have information over there about it. So if you're interested in helping us, please grab one of these. I can take you to our website and explain it. As of a day or two ago, we were at 2,946 veterans. So this launched around Memorial Day, really. We're also documenting cemeteries as well. So this is an optional part of the survey. And Terracon's idea that since these people were already going out into the cemeteries to document the veterans, if they would be willing to just fill out some cemetery information for us as well. So this is going to help us really build up and get our cemetery information more robust. So we already have 929 cemeteries documented through it. So again, 7,000. We know we won't find them all, right? Because we know that some, we just don't have burial locations for all of them. But we're really hoping to get our numbers up. This is Washington County. So this dashboard is all online. It's live. So if somebody in the world is out there, or in Ohio, is out there documenting a veteran right now, the moment they hit submit, it'll show up on this dashboard. So you can zoom in by county. So I went to Washington County just to see what's already been documented. There's 42 grave sites documented in Washington County and 8 cemeteries. According to the Sons of the American Revolution, there's about 250 Revolutionary War veterans buried here in Washington County. So get out there after this. You know what you're doing. So if you're saying, but I don't know where they're buried or where do I get started, we have a lot of resources on our website. So again, we have the data the SAR gave us. That's a great help. We give you recommendations on websites like Find a Grave and how to use that to help you find this information. So we are missing quite a few here in Washington County. We know we have a lot. And you can, well, I don't know if you guys can read that, but if you can zoom into this and it'll tell you, what cemeteries and which people have already been documented. Because you do want to check that before you go out so you don't duplicate efforts, right? Okay, that's what I got. What questions do you guys have? Yeah.
I just had a comment. The cemetery from where I am from has all the gravestones basically. I was told that was because the weather came from the west.
Oh, maybe.
Is that right?
I don't know. That's very well possible. They might have made that decision historically. Yeah, it's very well possible. There's always an exception to the rule. Yeah.
How long is it, Sons of American
Yeah.
Revolution? And also the Sons of Union Veterans Auxiliary.
Oh, yeah.
And there's over 100 Union veterans buried at Rockland Cemetery.
Okay.
So we talked yesterday at our meeting, we're planning on going in there and trying to register all those veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you register Union veterans to?
No.
Just
No, not yet. Yeah. I get Terracon and a tizzy every time I talk about this because I'm like, let's do all the wars. And they're like, can we do the Revolutionary War first and then move on, Krista? Hopefully someday we will. But right now, for the sake of the 250th anniversary, we're just sticking with Revolutionary Wars. I would love to do the War of 1812 next because, again, starting with some of these oldest grave sites, these are the most endangered, the ones that are, I wouldn't say necessarily least well known because a lot of groups like the SAR and the DAR have done a lot of work to preserve and protect and document grave sites of these veterans. But just because of their age, a lot of them are really disintegrating. So, yeah, stick with us. Maybe we'll do Civil War something.
So what do you think about cleaning gravestones? I've seen this D2
Yes.
used.
Yeah. I do recommend D2 because it is what the National Park Service uses. So that's what's used to clean the Washington Monument. And it's not to say that other material isn't acceptable to clean gravestones. But when I mentioned Jason Church with the NCPTT, the NCPTT a number of years ago did testing on D2 to check pretty much to see, yes, is it doing what it's supposed to do? Clean. It's a biological agent, so it cleans the gravestone, but it's also getting rid of anything growing on the stone too. But to make sure it didn't have long-term effects, negative effects to the stone. So there is other materials out there. It's just nothing really has gone through that level of testing like D2 does. So that's what I use. D2, yeah, it's D2 biological agent. It can be hard to find. You can't go to Lowe's and Home Depot and stuff to buy it. You can order it online. There's a couple vendors here in Ohio. So yeah, good question.
Do you spray it on?
Yeah. So it kind of depends on the condition of the stone. If a stone is in really bad condition and you're worried about doing any scrubbing or physical activity, you can you wet the stone down with water, spray D2 on, let it sit for a minute, hose it off, and then just walk away. And over time, it'll do its thing. So really D2, the moment you clean the stone with it, regardless of your method, it won't be it's not like, oh wow, it looks just the same as the day it was put in. It takes time. Because it's going to penetrate, stones are very porous. So all of that is going to soak into the stone and really kill those biological agents, again, that moss and lichen and things over time. So the best thing to do is, clean it the best you can in the safest way you can, using, you never want to use like a pressure washer, just, soft scrubs. I use a lot of bamboo and wooden tools too. So just like popsicle sticks, you need to get into the lettering. You can like use a popsicle stick. Things that are very soft. Clean it with your D2, and then really, like I said, come back after a number of weeks or a number of months and see what sort of cleaning the D2 kept doing even after you left. So, Have any of you already used our app to record Revolutionary War veterans? So, like I said, we have all the information here. This is this QR code, and we also have the website here. It really helps. It'll tell you exactly how to download the app, what to do to get to. It's kind of a two-part process. But yeah, we'd love to have your involvement. The fun thing about this project is too that every single person that contributes to it will be memorialized for their work on this effort. So I know that some people get excited about that. They love the thought that they're helping and contributing with a 250 project. So if it's optional, you can put your name on there. We'll put you on the website someday. Yeah.
So I know nothing about till I came today.
Okay, great.
So if you are interested in doing this, is there a name or is there a roster of?
Yes.
And that way you. Okay.
Yes. So we have resources on our page. What I recommend people do is when we started this project, we wanted a starting point, right? We wanted to say, okay, what's already out there? What can we get access to? We talked to the DAR, we talked to the SAR, and the state level SAR folks said, yeah, we'll give you everything we have. So there's actually a 2,000-page PDF document on our website that the SAR gave us. It's alphabetized by surname. So what I do recommend using that document, but download it onto your computer. And if you want to say, I'm looking for anybody buried in Washington County, simply do a search in the PDF itself for Washington. And then it'll tell you all those veterans. And if they know where the gravesite is, they'll tell you. Some of them do have GPS coordinates associated with them, but not all of them. And really what I do and what I recommend doing is, we call it do your low-hanging fruit first, right? Some of these guys are very well known and very well documented. So if you create a list, you say, all right, maybe these are the guys buried in my area, so I'm going to go find them. Check and see if the database already has them, because you don't want to duplicate efforts. But then look on websites like Find a Grave. Can you find them on Find a Grave? If somebody else has gone out and already documented them on Find a Grave, then chances are they're going to be easy for you to find. So some people have asked us, if it's already on Find a Grave, then why do I have to do it again? And the reason is, for the sake of this project, and based on the rules and laws, if you will, of Find a Grave, we can't use photographs that are on Find a Grave. We don't have copyright permissions. So for the final project of this, we're only going to be able to use photographs taken by you guys as part of this project. So if, for example, we might say, yes, we know exactly where this veteran's buried because he's documented on Find a Grave and he's well known. But if nobody went out and recorded him, we're not going to be able to include a photograph. So that's why we want people to, yes, maybe it's a little bit of duplication of efforts, but the goal of this project really is to get exact burial locations, GPS coordinates. So somebody can, in the future, go right there, no, right there, this is where this person's buried. This is where their gravestone is. But also to get photo conditions. So if you're on Find a Grave, sometimes photos might be 10 or 20 years old. And that's very helpful, but we want to know what the gravestones look like now. Because kind of the whole point of the project is after we publish and we get all this out, we want communities to look through this information and say, oh, some of these veterans have really poor grave sites. Maybe their gravestones are fallen over, they need cleaned, or maybe they need a whole new marker. Maybe they never even had a marker. So we want people in communities to know what they have so that they can go prioritize preservation efforts for the veterans that need it versus maybe the ones that have always been cared for.
So generally, I would say a large cemetery is going to have a lot of people that might be involved. Little township cemeteries, are those the places that you think is the best place to do any work?
Probably, because they're less likely to have the coverage, right?
Exactly.
So like when I don't know if this is going to be very helpful. Oops. Uh-oh. Well, I'll show you real quick. This is not good because it's so zoomed in. But we have, of course, a lot of coverage in Central Ohio. You know, the places actually, surprisingly, with our most veterans by county is Hamilton and Claremont, so Cincinnati, Mahoning and Trumbull up by Youngstown.
Can you point those out?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So Hamilton and Claremont.
Okay.
So these two counties right here. There's a ton of people in Cincinnati because I'm not an expert, but a lot of people came to Marietta and then they went to Cincinnati, right? So Hamilton, Claremont, there's Youngstown. So Mahoning and Trumbull, Ross County, which is in that blob right there. Yeah, Chillicothe, yeah. And then you guys, really. So like what I was always surprised about is when we started this project, I thought for sure the most veterans would be buried in Washington County. But they're actually not, at least not based on the information we have. Probably, I think Claremont is the most, and they have like over 400. Now that again, that's with information we already know.
Yeah, so it could evolve.
It could absolutely evolve. Yeah. So you guys are certainly up there. I think Washington County is like number 6.
What city is Claremont?
There's not a whole lot in Claremont. It's just right beside. It's to the east of Hamilton, which is Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just right beside of it. There's a ton. I mean, I was like, who knew? I'm sorry, it's terrible. Please, nobody have anything against me if you're in Claremont County. I can't tell you what the county seat is. Thank you. Thank you. Batavia. Thank you. I should know that. Put me on the spot. But yeah, I guess, there was a lot of migration into the Youngstown area too, or what became the Youngstown area. So it's interesting to see. And of course, up here in Northwest Ohio, we have very few. Some of these counties only have one documented veteran. And really, that's because a lot of the migration, as it happened in Ohio, kind of started down here and spread north and west. And by the time Northwest Ohio was settled, it was really past the time a lot of these veterans had passed away. So we just don't see all of it. Yes, that's a black swamp. Yep. So a lot of I have a really good map. It's not in this presentation because I can only do so much, but that Joe made with Terracon that shows sort of the migration based on the burial location. And, really it's up here in Northwest Ohio, it was more like, 1840s-ish. By the time we saw a lot of migration there, and a lot of those guys were long gone by then. So it's really interesting. I mean, it's been a really interesting project.
And along the rivers and.
Yeah.
Is that on which website?
Yeah, this is on this website. Right here.
If you click on it, you can see the county.
Yeah. Oh yes, you can zoom in, you can click on anything on there.
The county I'm looking at, I used to one little dot that I know my great-great-grandfather was a Revolutionary War from Gallican.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So some of these, we know, we're pretty sure every county has at least one.
Okay.
Even these. So you put me on the spot. The ones that right on. Thank you, Van Wert. Some of the, I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. Again, the SAR records are very helpful for us with that, just to know where to get started. But again, there could be more, and we just don't have the documentation. Interestingly, we also have a very large, and I just don't have the map up here, a very large void in Hocking County.
That's where I am from, so that's why I was asking about the smaller.
Very interesting void there, and
They're
yeah,
away from the river there.
yes, there's kind of this void here, and if you look at the map as we, which again I don't have as part of this presentation, Hocking County is surrounded by. I mean, Hocking's not too far from Chillicothe, right? So, and Ross County has a ton of veterans, so that you see this huge population surrounding it, and then Hocking County is like, there's a few guys here, and that makes no sense to us. So we think likely there hasn't been the research done maybe there. So if somebody's really interested in Hocking County, we could really use somebody focusing on the area, Yeah.
I think to explain why there are more around Cincinnati and Marietta during the Indian Wars, Fort Harmon was kind of vacated with all the Revolutionary soldiers that worked there when they left the fort and went over to build another fort during the Indian Wars around Cincinnati. So I think that could be the reason.
Okay. Yeah. This is what's been fun. I'm not a war historian, I'm a cemetery person. So like I didn't know a lot of this, honestly, when I got started. So it's been really exciting. So please consider. I know it's not great weather right now, but it's fun and help us get our numbers up. We're really hoping to find as many as we can. Yeah.
We're from the state across the river that shall not be named. Do you know if they have anything similar to that, or? And
to my knowledge, we're the only state doing this project, which surprises me because I thought when we came up with this project, it was like, oh yeah, everybody's gonna be doing it. I don't actually, not that it helps you, but we're actually talking to the Indiana American 250 Commission next week because they want to start this project. They heard about ours and they want to start it. So yes, Michigan. I don't know of one going on in Michigan. Some states, what I've heard, again, I'm not really an expert on this, but some states I've heard already have a lot of this done. I think Pennsylvania has very good documentation already about where their veterans are buried. I think I heard Illinois does too. I'm not sure. I could have that wrong, but yeah, you might check. I mean, if you have any connections up there, even contact their American 250 Commission. Sure. I'd be curious because I mean, again, I don't know a lot about it. We have so many veterans here due to our military lands, right? So this was bounty land given to veterans for payment of service. I'll be honest, I don't even know if other states had that. I mean, I think because we were the Northwest Territory and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, has some of that. Yeah, like did Michigan have those? I just don't know. I'm such Ohio-centric, I just don't know.
Yeah, really say that.
Yeah.
Yes, I will.
They didn't say, the narrators didn't say that they got land in Ohio for payment. They said they had difficulty paying.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised. They didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because for us, that's the important information here. I mean, that's what we say when we describe our town.
Right.
That is true north of Ohio, Connecticut, too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what I've heard, and again, I didn't really know this, or maybe it was on the documentary. I get so much information, I forget where I learned it now. But like Northern Ohio has a tendency to be New Englanders, Connecticut. Yeah. Southern Ohio is more Virginians. Yeah. I didn't realize that either. It does. Yeah.
Like I mentioned, I'm on Sons of American Revolution. When we do grave dedications for Revolutionary War, it looks like you can pull some of that information to the website in the year.
Yes, that's exactly what we've done. The SAR has been really great giving us what they have. And then we're working with, various DAR groups across the state that are working on giving us their information too. So we know that when this project, because at some point we got to kind of pull the plug on this, right? We got to say, this is it for the sake of the 250th celebration. We do want to keep this website up and running. After next year, people can still keep adding information to it if they want to. But we will at some point have to sort of say, this is as much as we can do right now, and then fill in the gaps with that information. Because will they? Yes, absolutely. It's been exciting. If you guys follow you can follow American 250 Ohio Commission on Facebook. They have lots. We've done some fun social media posts about some of our milestone projects, like the 1,776 veteran that was documented in this. And, we hit our 1/3 mark at 2,333. So we're hoping to get, maybe once we eventually hit 3,000. Yeah, we should. That's a good idea. That's a great idea. Yeah. I'm gonna let my coworker know that. Say, hey, Marie, put a. Yeah, she runs our website side of it for me, and she's done a great job. But yeah, we have lots of blogs. We have information on there on how to research your veterans if you're interested in joining, like the SAR or the DAR. We have a guest blogger that's come on with us, who's done a lot of research around African American veterans of the Revolutionary War and has recently authored some books. So it's fun. It is, yeah. Yep, and you can find everything on that. So that's the dashboard. That's all your research tools. That's how to download the instructions. Actually, I might have some of those with me. That is Marie. Yes, Marie Schwartz. She's one of our employees. But she's been helping me a lot with this project. So yeah, I forgot I had these with me. If you guys want any, this is the instructions. Now this is on our website too, but if you guys want just paper copies, I totally forgot I had some of these. So, and there's, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Oh. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
First person, once a year.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Is it a fundraiser event? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Yes, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you all so much for coming and sticking around. Yes, absolutely.